Good evening. I'm Melanie Risden with the Western Standard, and we have a very interesting interview lined up for this evening. We're actually going to be speaking with Kyle Kemper. He is a fella who is well versed in the crypto world, but he is also, interestingly enough, the half brother to our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Let's introduce Kyle right now. Thanks for joining us tonight, Kyle.
My pleasure to be here, Melanie. Thank you very much for having me on.
Now, you are currently living down in the States. That's a fairly new or recent thing, is it not?
I met my wife 4 years ago, and I have been spending a lot more time down in San Diego. And like pre-pandemic, I was back to Canada every month for 10 days and back and forth. So tons of travel and tons of border travel. And then all of that ended in March of 2020. And, since then, life has gotten a lot more difficult, and I've got having children on both sides of the border has created a lot of kind of issues for myself. But we just deal with them, and we take one step forward, and we just keep on moving, and we keep doing the best that we can do.
Well, let's find out a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about you. Like your family, how you are related to Justin. Just give us a little background.
Yeah, sure. So, I was born in Ottawa. My father's Freed Kemper. He's in kind of real estates and in restaurants in Ottawa. My mother is Margaret Trudeau. So I was her fourth child. I have a full sister named Alicia, as well. I grew up in Ottawa, loving that space and place. Went to Dalhousie University in Halifax. Had an incredible 4 years out there studying business and entrepreneurship and marketing. After that, I worked in venture capital and then worked in mobile app technology. And then in 2013, I was actually working at my family restaurant when I kind of had someone walk into my life that taught me all about Bitcoin. And it started my journey, and I had a great awakening to that, because prior to that, I would say like one of the really kind of pivotal moments in my life was 9/11. 9/11, I remember being in grade 11 at the time, and I was just like, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And then, you know, I started asking questions about that. And then, in 2003, Loose Change came out. And then 2007, a movie called Zeitgeist came out. And after watching Zeitgeist, the third part of it specifically talked all about the men behind the curtains, like who could possibly pull off this? And it identified the central banks and the power the central banks have over the world, and the power, like, there's one great quote from, I think it was Rockefeller or Rothschild or one of them, about, I care not who runs the country, I care who is, so long as I control the money.
Right.
And that started my journey and provided the kind of the impetus for crypto. And I saw it as basically Bitcoin could be this scalpel that, that removes this cancer on society. And so working in that for the last 7-8 years has been an amazing journey, and has taken me all over the world, introduced me to all sorts of different cultures and people and groups, and I'm deeply involved in that space. But I also really believe in freedom and liberty, and and our ability as human civilization to, I feel like we're on the verge of a golden age here. And one of the things about age transitions is there's generally a period of chaos that kind of ensues in that transition. And I feel like COVID represents, one of this chaos that is going to help bring about this new golden age.
So, growing up, then, sharing the same mother as Justin, did you spend a lot of time with him, or were you somewhat
I
removed?
did spend a lot of time with Justin. Yeah, I mean, Justin and I he was a great
Like
kind
he
of,
was your big brother,
he
like
was my
12
big
years
brother. Oh
older.
yeah,
Yeah.
like 13 years older. So I had three brothers. So I had Justin,
Mm-hmm.
who is the eldest, and then Sasha, who is the middle brother, and then Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
who is the youngest brother. Michelle tragically passed in an
Yeah.
avalanche. His body was literally, he was skiing, doing what he loved, and he was sucked into a lake, and Mother Earth took him in, and he was a really pure, incredible soul. and so the world is stronger because that soul is within it. Sasha was a real kind of revolutionary. He was chronicling the secret war in Liberia, Chechnya, Palestine, Israel, and then he was in he was in Iraq during the invasion there, and like chronicled it all. And so he's kind of an intellectual, kind of sees clearly, I would say. And then Justin always was kind of a leader, and could grab attention, could inspire people, could connect with people, had an ability to touch people, to to own a room, to be just really an amazing. And he was also like really competitive too. So from skiing to water sports to canoeing, we've done so much together, and I really feel like I've learned so much from all three of my brothers, and my
And you looked
mother
up
and
to
my
them?
father. And I
And
looked up to them,
yeah.
absolutely. All of them in their own ways, but that doesn't mean to say like, I wanted to be them, or
Hmm.
like, is jealous of them. It's like, they go their own way. And and over time, for the last kind of 10 years, Justin has, moved into this political role. And I dissent. I don't identify with what he's doing. I recognize, like, if I'm like, okay, I'm a businessman now. I'm a businessman and I need someone to be a spokesperson for my project or my company. Justin would be a terrific spokesperson for that. And I feel like that's exactly, what he's doing right now. Um, yeah.
Did it surprise you? I mean, we all know that Justin was a teacher, a drama teacher. Did it surprise you when he started to make the move into politics, or did you expect it? What were your
No,
thoughts?
no surprise there.
Mm.
That was no surprise. Um, from him being a teacher and then an actor as well. I think he shot 2 movies, post teaching, pre that. So, that's interesting. But yeah, and then I mean, I feel like that was like, in his mind, his what his father did. And he watched his father live an incredible life and do all these amazing things and have amazing things and have amazing access and experiences, and tremendous ego as well.
Mm.
And so, that was the path that he was on. And I think as well, people got around him too that recognized, how much power he has within him, and what an asset he can be. And so I really like, people like, I'll name names like Jerry Butts, like, he's been there basically since the beginning,
Hmm.
like helping, whisper into his ear. And Jerry, if you're listening, it's like Lord of the Rings, part 2, Worm Tongue. That's how I feel right now about you, buddy.
Interesting. Yeah. So, with your brother moving into politics and then obviously becoming the Prime Minister of Canada, did that change your relationship with him? Were you still able to connect with him? What did that change anything for you?
Well, I think, I mean, he's like, he wants to keep a familial relationship, and it's like, and have fun and play and do fun stuff. And I love doing fun stuff too. We've had good engagements, but when it comes down to like talking policy or talking, about cryptocurrency or decentralization, like, it just there wasn't that much connection there. Plus I've like, I harbor, or I have a view that I don't believe in uh, in centralized, like, heavily centralized control, because heavily centralized control, and I don't believe in global government. I don't believe that corporations have the best interests of the people at heart, because corporations have a responsibility to their shareholders to drive profits. And profits can, if profits like, if that's your core focus, then it can come at the expense of people. And so I feel like that's there. So we've had a little bit of a disconnect. I'm not saying that Justin is a corporate person, but he is, the way that the global corporatocracy is set up, as Klaus Schwab just recently said. He's and he spoke in 2017. He spoke specifically about how happy he was that Justin, one of his proteges, is in the position that he's in. And that he has infiltrated the cabinet with all of their members. And so you look at that on all sides of the board, they're infiltrated. And then we have this left right illusion taking place when really both parties are the same. Like, you look at what O'Toole's doing versus what Justin's doing. They're both just vaccine pushers right now. And I don't even call it a vaccine. It's a fake vaccine. It's not a vaccine. Doesn't provide immunity, and it doesn't stop transmission. Therefore, it's not a vaccine. It's a experimental biotechnology, nanotech, magnetic goo. I'm not interested.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because I have been sort of following you on Twitter and seeing some of the responses that you are putting out to not only your brother, not only to Justin Trudeau, but also to people who are sort of even tweeting about him. And I saw one tweet where you did say, you were saying that people need to, like, you hashtag fake vaccine and replied, investigate the vaccine, follow the money. This is well beyond Justin. So saying that, my question for you is, are you insinuating that your brother is, our prime minister is sort of a pawn? Are you saying that he is being controlled? Like, what are your thoughts behind that tweet?
I mean, I think that this whole COVID scam is a globally orchestrated phenomenon to consolidate power and drive enormous profits and facilitate more wealth transition from countries to corporations. I mean, I don't know how anybody can deny that. Canada's has spent close to $1 trillion, like more money than it is, unfathomable amounts of money.
And so you believe, and so you believe Justin Trudeau would get behind this. You believe he would get behind, if he knew full well that what the agenda was. Do you think he would support it?
I mean, I think this comes back to this condition of hypnosis. Like, I truly believe that he believes that what he's doing is the right thing, even if he knows that it's the WEF agenda. That he believes that this is the right thing to do. That he believes
WEF agenda, meaning World Economic Forum,
Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution agenda. You'll own nothing and be happy, and we bring about universal basic incomes. We load central bank digital currencies on people. We implement social credit systems, onto the population. This is all these these are amazing, hysterical, tyrannical dreams, in my opinion, and but they have been slowly implementing them, and it requires more than just governments. Government's just one arm of it. Look, tech, media, pharma, all are working together in this giant charade, or charade, as whatever we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you Melanie, you worked with Global. You had to you escaped that world. You saw that was this. You couldn't I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you probably couldn't continue there any longer in good faith.
Well, for me, my interest in getting into the media many years ago was because I saw it as a check and balance. I saw it as the means to have accountability, to hold accountability to our elected officials, to big corporation, to give voice to people. I mean, let's, if you look at, there's so many situations in history where certain things would have gone completely unknown to the population had the media not sort of whistle blew or brought awareness to something. I mean, even just look at the vaccine that came out for, I think it was the swine flu back in 70s, 80s, and people were dying from that. I think, especially considering there was no centralized, social media and centralized kind of information hub. People likely wouldn't have known that was an issue had the media not brought it forward and really became a voice for the people. So that was my draw to getting into media. I'm a justice seeker and I'm a truth teller, and so for me, I was just witnessing things in all mainstream media that I found challenging. The lack of ability to question. I found it a struggle to I felt like the investigative journalism, the digging, the getting to the bottom of things, and the questioning were all sort of being pushed away. No, we don't do that anymore. And I struggle with that. So yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah, that's part of why I'm where I'm at. But you're talking about this hypnosis. Is this what you're referencing? I've seen you reference a few times mass formation psychosis. Is this what you're talking about with this
Yeah,
fact that
I
people,
mean, yeah, and Charles Eisenstein wrote a great essay called Mob Mentality and the Unvaxxed. And Charles Eisenstein is an incredible writer and thinker, one of the greatest of our time. The author of Sacred Economics. But within this essay, he really like paints the picture of beware. Like, all the genocides in history have taken place when hate is poured upon a segment of the population. And like with all this, like, you look at Justin's comments and just media comments, there's a lot of energy towards trying to paint the unvaxxed as like, these selfish, dangerous,
racist,
extremist, misogynist, racist, like,
how could we
QAnon
tolerate
loving
these people?
Trumpers, like, just every identity label that they can try to put to cancel them. And by like doing that enough, when you enforce that enough, you actually get the population to the point where they're like, okay, like, yeah, let's put them in camps. Like, let's force vaccinate them. Let's take this up a notch on them. Like, let's seed this kind of hatred. And that, like, I feel like that has been fomenting a lot. And especially when you have like, these really advanced technological tools, including Twitter and Facebook and the media, to be able to curate a narrative and really push that narrative and enforce that narrative, and also utilizing a very sophisticated, like, bot network to get into replies and get into comments and be the first on the Twitter list, like, like basically waging psychological war on people who are trying to stand up, combined with the canceling and like the discrediting and the punishment of doctors and scientists who are against who are speaking their truths and airing their concerns about a whole myriad of different issues, because there's not just one thing within this. I mean, there's so many questions that demand, like, serious inquiry and debate. And when you can't have debate about things, like, it just actually enforces the fact that it's probably based on a lie, because the truth is easily debated. Lies are not easily debated, and that's why they oftentimes will not debate things at all. Like, just don't even talk about it. It's like, I remember, like, It's like climate change, for example. It's like, they're just like, the science is settled. Science is settled. No debate. The time for debate is over. And it's like, that's just a classic example of like not wanting to talk about things because there's good questions out there that warrant discussion. And the same thing about this, like, there's so many questions that warrant like qualified discussion and debate and open public debate. And when we can't have that, and then we're at risk of the entire population being hypnotized to a specific narrative. If you repeat a lie enough, like, it becomes the truth in someone's mind. And then, like, if you keep on repeating that, then the people will defend that lie. They'll defend that narrative, and they'll, and then they'll start extolling hate based on fear. So, at the root of all this has been fear. In the beginning, it's fear, 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 fear. And they painted hope as this vaccine. Like, from the very, very beginning, it was all about the hope of this in the vaccine. It's very clear, like, this structure, all the truth is there. All the writing is on the wall. It's all available. If we had a legal system that, was up to the challenge of properly investigating and holding the corporations and the individual actors, to account for this and seeking justice, as you said. There's so many people. I mean, just go talk to Rainer Fulmich over in Germany. Like, he's been doing this for a year and a half now, full time. And I'm just one person. I'm not like, I'm not a savior. I'm not the Messiah. I'm just one person here. I'm just speaking my truths. And like, I've had a lot of people reaching out, like seeking me to, like, you're a hope. I'm like, I am just a person and I'm doing the best that I can here. And I want to stand up and, like, in the words of Gandhi, I aim to be truthful, gentle, and fearless. So, like, I don't want to come out and try and attack people, because we really need to bring people together.
But having said that, though, bringing people together, the divisive language that's come from your brother, our PM, would you say that he is guilty of hate speech with the comments that he's made?
I would say that is one of the things that he is guilty for. Yeah, I mean, you can't say that. He's using, like, he's like, the other a really impactful book in my life that I recommend everybody read is called The Four Agreements. First agreement is be impeccable with your words. Second agreement is don't make assumptions. Third agreement is don't take anything personally. And fourth agreement is always do your best. And honestly, I feel like Justin's like violated all of the agreements at like every step of this pandemic. And like, these assumptions and these words that he's using, is he's casting some black magic out there. And it's like, it's really frustrating for me. It hurts my heart. And and to see the level, and then just like coming after, like, and like trying to marginalize like all these Canadians who have had enough, who are standing up, like, and I feel like this is where we're at with this trucker convoy, is like, the energy, like this is the flip side to this mass formation psychosis, is like, people are also like, we're just waiting for something, because there's maybe like 20% of the people who actually like are deeply hypnotized by this narrative, and then there's probably like 60% or 50 or 60% that are just like, just kind of go along. They're like, I'll wear my face diaper at the store because, like, I don't want to cause any trouble. Like, I'll just do that. Like, I'll get the vaccine because I don't want to, like, ruffle feathers. But at the core, they know there's something wrong with that. And then there's like, 20 or 30% of people. I'd say there's like 10% who are like vehemently opposed, like, my level of like deep distrust and against this in every way, shape, and form, and standing up and dissenting to it. And it's really important that we have dissent and opposition, because that's why we have parliament. There's supposed to be an opposition that stands up and says no to this stuff. But like, it doesn't seem like we have that. It seems like we have, a really soft parliament, and also like the foundations of it, they don't answer any questions. Like, they get asked tough questions, they don't answer them. They just give these terrible, like, scripted answers that are so transparent, but again, it feels like this is part of just a general kind of hypnosis. And then I'll say, like, so when more and more people stand up, and with this convoy, it's this is like the spark to this like gasoline soaked mattress. So I think, and like, and the output of this is hopefully going to be like, more awareness, more understanding, calls to action to stop this, and like, a real like, populist, not uprising but rising, like, and it's speaking our truth, and people coming together and rallying around something. It's like Canada winning the gold medal, like all of Canada. Like in 2010, I was in Vancouver when they won the gold medal, dude. Everybody in Canada, we all came together on that. And right now I feel like, most of Canada is going to get behind these truckers, because it's an amazing story, and seeing all the people and hearing the people, and like hearing I don't know, I saw a video of the children, like, sending in their messages of support. It was so beautiful, and like, it's so beautiful. And this is a symbol, this is an action, this is a happening. And for Justin to come out with his statements yesterday and say that, it's unacceptable, they're holding views that are unacceptable. Like, what does that mean? Like, unacceptable to whom? Like, to you? Is that that's your subjective view, is that it's unacceptable? These are views that I don't necessarily agree with, but hey, in Canada, it's totally cool because we're a free country. We can have opposing views, and we can talk about these things, and we can debate these things. Like, that would be like, kind of a cooler answer. But instead, like, it's like, it's trying to marginalize and trivialize this. And Jerry Butts is out there right now on Twitter doing this exact same thing, trying to like paint the camp. And, I will say, like, those guys cannot pull people out in numbers like the truckers are pulling people. They simply can't do that. You know who they could pull out in numbers? They could pull out the CBC news vans, the CTV news vans, the Global news vans, the CP24 news vans. Man, they could get a convoy of news vans, no problem. I mean, geez, that's basically what they did for their campaigning, as they're just traveled around by, like, followed by a bunch of news people. They could get a room full of blue check marks on Twitter, who are all people who are paid to tweet, and people are being paid by big media to push an agenda. So it's like, if you're talking about like they could pay people, but these people behind me in Canada, all across Canada, they're not being paid to do this. Yes, they raised almost $6 million in a GoFundMe campaign, but
which
these
has
guys are
been, yeah, and that's been questioned over and over and over in the mainstream media. I've even seen people tweeting that it's laundering money, and that the funds are potentially going to be used for all sorts of things that are hate driven, or I don't even want to say the word terrorist driven, but you know what I mean? Like,
they're using all of it. Exactly.
But the other thing too that I've noticed, and I would say Trudeau is part of this as well, is, like you said, minimizing, right? Like, it's a small band, it's a small movement, it's just a small kind of, irritation that we have to deal with. And again, I think part of the problem, you were saying we don't have much of an opposition. I think people would likely say, and I've heard from many, that they feel like what's happening with our parties, with our political parties, is that they are looking for the most popular opinion, the majority, right? They're looking for the majority of public opinion. So I think the problem too is with the coverage that this comes from the mainstream media, reaching a lot of people. I mean, I know that different types of independent media are growing, but I think the average Canadian still sort of relies on their 6 o'clock news. So if what they're seeing is that perception, then I think our politicians are starting to, or not starting to, but have believed that is the public opinion, right? That this is just a fringe offshoot of society that don't want to conform. They're like have been said, they're radicals. They're and I've spoken to a number of people. I've interviewed so many people who are your everyday Canadian who are struggling through this, doctors, nurses who are, questioning things and being vilified or punished or ostracized, at losing their jobs, not able to work. They're not radicals. They're not dissenters. They're not extremists.
Canadians.
They're
just Canadians.
Canadians who have an opinion on the topic of, specifically with the vaccine mandate, but even just some of the other
they've seen it. They've
right.
They've done their research and see that this is all BS. And and I mean, not all. Maybe there's different levels, but or they're just opposed to it. Like, hey, I have a medical condition, I probably shouldn't take that, and they're like, no, you got to take it no matter what. But again, you want to talk about minorities? You want to talk about minority? Okay, let's talk about the Liberal Party. Minority government. Let's talk about the number of votes that they got. We're talking of all of Canada. I think it's maybe less than 10% of actual Canadians voted for that party. When you sketch out of all the potential voters who actually voted for the Liberal Party, it is a minority. It is a very small minority. So most people don't vote. So and we look about the popularity. Look what Max Bernier did in the last election. Look, the crowds. The PPC, the purple wave, it was this was actually popular. Now, they didn't have the tuned large voter base or the sophisticated party kind of system, because winning an election is it's like science. It's just it's engineering is what it is, of lists and encouraging people and hammering them and getting donations from them all the time, because if they can get a $5 donation out of you one time, then I know you're good for a vote. So they just they just work this machine over and over again, and they make all the promises in the world. They talk about all this stuff that they're going to do, and then they get elected, and then there's zero accountability for them to hold on to anything they said, which is a fundamental reason why our system of democracy is completely broken. And we need to start looking at new models, looking at direct democracy, looking at liquid democracy, looking at the technology behind crypto and Bitcoin to create accountable systems so that I can vote in you, Justin, and believing that you do. But as soon as you start voting in ways that I don't agree with, I can pull my vote from you immediately. And that just creates accountability and responsibility, and doesn't just give these blank power checks to individuals. Because ultimately, what's the point of representative democracy? It was created when we didn't have the internet. Well, we didn't have phones. So it's you got people all over the country, and we want to govern. So it's all right, let's get one person to go to Ottawa, and they're going to represent our interests up here in Chilliwack, BC. It's okay, great. So they all come together, and they work for 6 months a year on representing that, and they go back. But now we're in this age, we have internet, we have communication, we have Zoom. We don't need to give all this power to this one person. And that represents, honestly, they represent maybe 20% of the district's population. And if you get 20% of the entire population's vote, you're going to be that representative. And so that just doesn't, that's just a sign of a broken system. And then when you have outside influence and the lobbying firms working so hard towards controlling the policy and funding the campaigns on all sides, then you have a bunch of politicians who are basically going to take legislation and and policy proposals from the private sector and push it as if it's their own brilliant ideas, and they'll fight for it, just we've seen the Fighting for Canada to purchase hundreds of millions of these fake experimental vaccines in secret deals. We don't know how much each vaccine costs, not to mention all these these plastic tests. How much do each of them cost? This is all being subsidized. It's all part of wealth transfer. And
Yeah.
then you've got then there's also like things like CERB, which is okay. This is like the path to universal basic income. It's like, oh yes, we're sorry. Here's $4,000 a month, or here's $2,000 a month. Here's just like
Mm.
money, and
Yeah.
what's the effect of that? Inflation. And now we're like, the next step of this whole thing is inflation, and like we're going to
Hmm.
see hyperinflation. We're seeing it already, and
So what, and speaking of that, speaking of the I guess the financial ramifications of the spending that we've been doing. The interesting thing for me all along has been this continuous conversation around um, you know uh, stretching our healthcare system, taxing our healthcare system, not enough hospital beds, too many cases for our capacity, things like that. And I mean, when we're talking about the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent so far on the things that you just mentioned, we're talking, tests and vaccines and all of these things. Had we invested as a country those hundreds of billions of dollars back into our healthcare system, which I think is broken, and it's evident of that. There's so much evidence of that. But had we spent the money there, I mean, even just alone in the province, I'm in Alberta, and knowing billions have been spent in our province as well for masks and tests and all of this kind of stuff. When still the narrative from our AHS has been all along capacity issues. We don't have enough beds. We're taxing our healthcare system. It seems strange to me, the focus to me, I mean, logically doesn't seem like it was right.
no, it seems like it was all a show,
Like I
and I
feel,
mean,
yeah, like I feel like we could have
and
done some repair.
the media's been like caught with like staged scenarios. Like CBC was caught with a mannequin. Like
Mm.
like they're really fabricating this whole thing, and they're like just like any other year except this year or last year, they implemented these crazy protocols, and they didn't allow people to have their family or friends or their power of attorneys with them in the hospitals,
That's
which was leading
devastating.
to people being like, given like, weird drug solutions like remdesivir onto, like, and then put on a ventilator and then dying. And then, I mean, you look at the American system, there's a bunch of like, evidence of, financial incentives for ventilating and for declaring COVID deaths too. So it's like, wow, it's like, this like the like big hospital system. It's like, it's the pharmaceutical hospital system. This isn't like the healthcare system. It's like the sick care system. Like, they're
Mm.
not really in it for our health. If you wanted people's health, like, why the hell weren't you talking about like, getting vitamin D? Like, it's a natural, it's a byproduct of spending time in the sun, especially when you're sweating in the sun.
Which we don't get
um
much up here. So,
which you don't get.
encouraging Canadians to be taking supplements through the winter months and the darker months, for sure.
Indeed, and also understanding that is one of the reasons why Canada has a very reliable flu season
Mm.
that starts in October and goes through January. Like, it
Right.
goes through January, February every year. It's always the same thing. It's like there's just people are vitamin D deprived, and that's when, like, some sickness kind of comes up and it spreads to a community, and people, our natural immune systems fight those and become stronger, and we go through this period. Like, sickness is actually like, your body detoxing and cleansing. So it's like, I had it, like, I guess you could call it COVID, I don't know, but I had a terrible fever, like, an unbelievable fever, and it was like, one full night of like crazy, 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 crazy sweats, and then I woke up the next day, I felt great. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, we go through kind of those cleansings, but had we really want to dealt with that, if that was the purpose of this was actually like, assuring Canadians have strong immune systems, then yes, vitamin D, vitamin C, exercise, diet. Instead, what they do, lock people at home, watch Netflix, don't talk to each other, order food off Instacart. It comes in, buy more processed food. Oh yeah, you still get your
And
beer,
then,
still get your
yeah.
alcohol. Oh yeah, and by the way, here's a bunch of legal pot too. So smoke yourself silly and just don't worry about it. Just watch the Netflix because the Netflix is fun.
And meanwhile, everybody's mental health, not everybody, but the majority of people's mental health has declined substantially across the country and around the world, really. I mean, we're almost in a mental health crisis more so than anything. If you look at the other statistics that don't get reported on very regularly.
Absolutely. And children, and look at our children, and like, one of the things that hurts me the most is the knowledge that, my kids were in Canada, were in Ottawa, like going to school every day wearing these masks, wearing plastic or cloth masks.
And what's it like where you are? Like, are there restrictions happening there as well?
So, I mean, I've only worn a mask on the airplanes with reluctance. But other than that, like, it will actually in the very, very beginning, because I was exposed to Sophie Trudeau's COVID in March of 2020. So I took it very seriously for 14 days. I did that whole silly 14-day thing. And then it was like, I remember I was probably around like day 12, 13 that I was like, yeah, this isn't looking. And then, like, in April, I recorded a video warning the world that this is going to be used to take away our rights. And, we need to stand up for that. And here we are.
So, question for you. This is maybe getting a little more personal. I know you had mentioned that you're active on Twitter, and I've seen some interesting tweets from you again. Sort of calling out Justin, our Prime Minister, on some of the tweets he puts out. But it looks like your last tweet response to him kind of got you in a little bit of trouble. Do you want to explain what you tweeted and
yes.
what happened?
Yeah, totally. So I'm banned off Twitter. So I'm in Twitter prison
for 7 days. You said, right?
I got a 7-day sentence, potentially longer if the Twitter council decides. And
this was because of a tweet you replied to of your brothers.
I saw him tweet this, like, 76 million vaccines administered. Go rush to get yours. Book your appointment today. Like, vaccines are the only way we get through this pandemic. Blah blah blah. And I just replied, #fake vaccine. Like, it doesn't provide immunity. It doesn't stop transmission. And according to VAERS, it's killed more people than all other vaccines in history that have been reported on VAERS. And that's all statistically factual. There's nothing.
And that's what got you booted.
And that got me booted. And it was literally like 2 minutes after I made that tweet.
Do you think he would have, like, reported you?
Well, I don't think Justin would have reported, but I don't believe that Justin actually, like, runs his Twitter account. So, like, the people who do run it probably pressed report or using their super secret blue check mark, Twitter private public partnership, they maybe did something. But I don't know. I don't want to, like, hypothesize too much. But now I'm in this, and if anything, it's just more. It's more reason to keep going. So, when
was the last time you spoke with your brother?
So the last time I saw him was the very beginning of like right before COVID, right before Sophie, like right when Sophie had just gotten back from Europe. Yeah, we had a family dinner, and then that was in like end of February 2020. Yeah.
Okay. And so my perception of your mother, whom I'm assuming you speak with, and
so we've had a little bit of a challenging relationship between my mother and I. She wrote me a kind of a nasty text message telling me that I was so not woke.
Is that an insult? So,
um,
so having said
you
that, I
know,
would have thought I would have pegged your mom as sort of a very free thinker from, from knowing a lot about her, well, reading a lot about her history and whatnot. So is she sort of in the Justin Trudeau mindset, and that's why she, like,
she's a victim of media hypnotization.
okay.
She I mean, one of the last times I was there, every single television was tuned to CNN. She was like, such a, like, Trump was the devil incarnate, and like, it's just, this speaks the power of the media to
Mm-hmm.
infiltrate. Plus, obviously, like, Justin's like, I mean, look, if your son was the prime minister, you'd probably be pretty proud and want to, like, support him and everything he's doing. And so, and then when you're like, you're so into the media, and the media has such control over you, and it's like, when presented with, like, when I would say something like, that was counter, it's Trump. It's like, oh, it's just like, let me just quickly cancel via like, putting on, like, this assumption that, well, somehow you're like supporting Trump in this. It's like, man, I'm not supporting Trump in this. Like, I think, he was part of this whole thing too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he was part of creating people massively divided over the last, 4 years before he got out of there. And then, so keeping this division stoked, that there's this, like, these two colors of red and blue of like polarized society, which are funny enough flipped in Canada. But
Mm-hmm. So, do you ever plan to come back to Canada, or do things have to drastically change for you to
yeah, I
return?
mean, like, we got to get rid of the vaccine mandates, and lift all vaccine requirements and testing requirements for coming in and out of the country, and then I'll
Mm-hmm.
happily come back to Canada. And like, and like, but last time I went to Canada, like, I went in because, like, I have an American wife and an American son. We wanted to go to Canada in the summer of 2020, so we actually, I just didn't trust the airlines, because, like, when you're flying, you deal with, like, airline personnel who carry an awful lot of power, and if, like, you run into the wrong person, like, your family could get separated at the airport, and I just couldn't take that risk. So we actually, acquired an RV, and we drove all across the country in the middle of a
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, and it was like, started in California, where I was like really hyped up, and then as we went across, like, Texas and Middle America, I remember being in a spring with like 1,000 people, like a hot springs in Texas with 1,000 people. Everyone is having a great time. I was like, there's nothing going on here. And as I got closer and closer to Canada, it just, like, it just kept getting more ramped up and more ramped up, and everybody wearing their these face coverings, and you know
So I
yeah
have, Kyle, I have a couple of questions for you before
fire away.
we
Let's
wrap up. And again, some of these might be a little on the personal side. So, but maybe you'll be fine to give me your opinion. There is a petition that is circulating around Canada, calling for Justin Trudeau to step down. Would you sign it?
Yeah, he should. Like, for my advice to him would be, yes, step down, get out of this. Like, you're a frog in a pot of water, the burner is on, and it's getting real hot. Get out before you boil. Like, get
So,
out before you boil.
so you see him as the frog, not the person turning up the heat. You don't see him as,
Well, I would say, like, the heat is being, like, that's just like,
you
a
mean
a
society.
metaphor. But like,
Yes,
yeah, but society is like, when he's getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and like, the statements are getting more like pointed
divisive
and
and mhm.
divisive and unconscious. Like, as they're going, like, he I it's like, he should step down, or like some of his MPs, like, any heartful, heart open, heart thinking humans who are part of, like, the group, like, get out of that group, get out of that party. All it takes is like, I don't know, maybe 10 of you to move to the other party, and then we've got a new prime minister. Like, then like, and if it's not, and if you recognize that the blue party is the same as the red party, it's just a different shade, then I would consider looking towards the purple party and looking towards people like Bernier and Hillier, and like, why don't we reset the Canadian political system, like, with some new energy that isn't a slave to the global corporatocracy. So, like, and so that's what I feel like. I don't have the exact answer. I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
But I have ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see that there is great hope. Like, Canada is an incredible country. We produce so much. We have so much. Like, and if we work together as Canadians towards shaping the Canada that we want to see, a prosperous, abundant Canada, we can realize that. We can make that a reality. If we are hypnotized into believing red, blue, left, right, identity politics, scarcity mindset, fear driven, mind controlled worldview that is being presented via the tube, via the channels and via the programs on television, then when we're in trouble. So that's why, like, I think it's important that people just keep speaking up, like, keep, like, talk to other people, ask the kind of the tough questions, but be truthful and be gentle, gentle in the way that you approach this. And, like, let's try and heal, because, like, yeah, like, a giant wedge has been created. And I seek, like, I don't think we need to have, like, mass hangings or lynchings or, like, violence to bring us through this. I think it's really important that we don't have violence. Like, violence is not going to be the answer here. Violence is only going to give them more power. And specifically on that note, this convoy that's going to Ottawa this weekend, to anybody who watches this and is going to be there, be on the lookout for agents provocateurs, because they are going to be there. They are going to be trying to incite violence. They're going to be carrying rocks. They're going to try and get, I can imagine we're going to see riot squads potentially there. And as soon as they bring out the riot squads, for every, 200 riot squad people, there's probably 2 or 3 riot squad people who are dressed as anarchists carrying rocks. And that
That's what I was
happened.
going to say. Do you anticipate that people will be planted?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's what they do. That's
Now
just what they do.
you heard that that Trudeau announced today that he's come into close contact with COVID, and he's now
Like, how
going
ridiculous is
into
that?
Yeah, he's now going to quarantine, probably far away from wherever the convoy is going to, set themselves up in Ottawa.
Yeah, he says
Likely,
he's going to be at home. He'll probably be at Harrington Lake. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably where he'll be. And there's
So it's good timing for that close contact. But
there's 2 entrances to that property.